From the winnipeg.ca/police website, you can access the crime maps and calls for service map. On the landing page, here are the two tools, and the calls for service map features 10 weeks of calls for service to the Winnipeg Police. Click the calls for service map button, and you'll be greeted with a disclaimer page stating that these are our calls for service, these aren't entirely crime related, and there's 10 weeks worth of data. Click the agree button, and it opens up the calls for service map dashboard. What you see on this dashboard is a summary of the last 10 weeks of all calls for service to the Winnipeg Police Service. These calls for service can come in through the telephone, in person, or online. The calls for service are broken down primarily by week and community. However, there are other ways that you can have a look at the data. You'll see across the top are filters that allow you to reduce the data by week, by day of week, by service type or category, by event type, by a specific community, or even by a specific neighborhood. There's a chart describing and totaling the different numbers of calls for service in each community by week. The calls for service by community chart is colored by the number of calls for service. So lower numbers have a lighter color, higher numbers have a darker color. So at a glance, you can tell that the downtown community has a higher number of calls for service, and Assiniboine South community has a lower number of calls for service. There's a pie chart that shows proportions of the different calls for service. There's a bar chart that shows the number of each different service type by week. The bar chart allows you to see a trend for the last 10 weeks. If you look at the top of the bar chart, it's showing an increase in calls for service, a decrease in calls for service, and an increase. And then a map that shows the total number of calls for service in different areas of the city. You can navigate the map by using your mouse wheel to zoom in and out, or if you're on a mobile or touch screen, you can use 2 fingers to pinch. You can move around the map by clicking and dragging, or by holding and dragging. If you're having trouble resetting the map, you can hit the home button, or you can click the refresh page. The information in the calls for service map is categorized by different service types: breaches and warrants, disturbances, danger, intoxicated persons, property, traffic, violence, and well-being checks. Some of them are in regard to crime and some of them are in regard to safety. For example, with disturbances and danger, we'll click apply. When you select a single service type or multiple service types, all that you will see in the event types are the ones related to that category. Similarly, if you want to select a neighborhood, you will see all neighborhoods available for selection. But if you select a single community, then you will have only the neighborhoods within that community available for you to select. So if, for example, you wanted to see how many disturbance or danger events there were in Assiniboine South, you would select disturbances and danger, and you could select Assiniboine South. If you wanted to see what types of disturbances or danger were happening in Assiniboine South, for example, public disturbance, then the map would be reduced by the different service type, by the different event type in the specific community. Once those are active, you can hover over and see just how many public disturbance events happened in a particular area of the city. If you were curious about a specific event type, for example, alarms in the whole city, you could filter by alarms only and see how many alarm calls for service occurred within that time period. If you're not sure about your neighborhood or community and want to know more about what's going on in your neighborhood or community, you can click this "Click here to find neighborhood community" button, and then enter an address, and it'll tell you within what neighborhood and community you are. So if I lived in the 800 block of Elmhurst and wanted to know what neighborhood or community I was in, there's a predictive search function that you can use where even if you know the partial spelling of your street name, the tool will return what the community and neighborhood is that particular address falls within. So when we go back to the previous map, we can enter Assiniboine South and Elmhurst community. If you've reset the filters and we're having problems bringing the page back to how you had it, you can always click refresh and it'll reset the page. If you're having trouble viewing the page, you can get a full screen experience by clicking the full screen button in the bottom left corner. Remember, to exit it, you will have to hit the escape or ESC button on the top left of your keyboard. For more information on Winnipeg Police statistics, you can view our monthly statistical report. The link is here in the disclaimer.